obviously now everyone's going to claim the new like device was going to be super sick and all this stuff. But I actually have heard from my guys. By the way, even before he got really good in CSGO, like I heard this in like 2013, they were all telling me like, yeah, the Nico guy's good in Western Wolves, and like, you know, some of these other players, like dupreeh's a good player, but they were all telling me this device guy, just watch for him, right? It's one of the reasons why in my career as an analyst, people used to make fun of me because I always kept expecting device to become the best player, and it took him a bunch of years to sort of get over the hurdle. But there's a reason why I kept doubling down, because first of all, you could look at his game and he was so skilled, and then also everyone was telling me always like, this guy's just like a natural talent or something. He's just good at the game. Who was device when you met him?
Oh, it was extremely young. Back then, he was actually, I think, was semi-pro at badminton. I had like a great career ahead of him in that space. So, at the very first, he didn't really know which direction to like take. So he wasn't, and Source wasn't serious at all. So you can't really. He was just a really young guy having fun. Or a kid. He was a kid back then.
And was that implied? Because as you said, the thing about badminton, I think people said it supposedly like he maybe didn't like go as hard on CS Source as the other players, and people wondered about his motivation or something.
I think he went as hard at CSS as anyone else.
Okay.
Later on, right? I remember having a talk with him back in days. I told him that he should definitely take the CS route because he was definitely going to be destined to be better at that. I didn't know, but I wanted him in my team.
Sure.
He was so good, right? So I remember telling him that he should definitely pick Source or just Counter-Strike because he is really, really great, right? There's no question about his individual gifts. So yeah, and he worked hard at it as well. A bit more sloppy than the rest of us, and had a bit more questionable attitude towards like playing long hours and all of that stuff.
Okay.
But that's predominantly, he was like, was he 14, 15 maybe?
Sure.
Like, and really fucking blame him, right? So
yes.
Yeah. So that's the device I met back then, right?
I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's interesting to ask you about him now, because obviously since then, like, I mean, here's the thing, because of like all the online era where they added a bunch of like bullshit MVPs, now like Simple's the #1. But if people don't know, there was one point in history a few years back where device actually had the most MVPs ever from HLTV.org, even though he played in all the eras of Cold Zero and fucking Nico and all the greatest players. So like now he's actually the opposite of what you're talking about. He's like the paragon of longevity and consistency, and his style is actually like super like fucking by the numbers and does everything correctly. And there's obviously an AWPer now mainly. Like, what's it been like to see him change from the player you met and have this long career? I mean, he's still playing now, mate. He might get to the top again now in 2023. What do you think of seeing this career?
Well, I kind of lost touch with most of them back then. So I don't know how he evolved. Like, as I said before, a lot about CS is about your personality, and that's going to carry you a long way. Like me and 3K2 talked about it before. There's no surprise that dupreeh actually made it this far, because he's a great teammate. He's an amazing human being. He works hard. Like he doesn't. He's actually going to make it somewhere, right? And actually going to become and stay at the top, because everybody around him loves working with him. And I think that I assume that device have had some issues. I've heard about his ex-girlfriend and stuff like that, okay. And I'm not really surprised that he has had those kind of issues, because we had them way back in Source as well.
Right.
We had a guy watching his IP because he left our team, or because he was with some girl, or we were practicing before a big event and he was suddenly at 20 FPS or something because he had some random girl over who was using his PC to play female Counter-Strike, and like,
okay.
Like we had. So if he still has some of those, like, if that's carried on, it's going to do something to your mentality. And if I think he talked about it as well, that it does something to you, that his ex-girlfriend cheated on him or something like that, right? So I think that there's a long period of time where that takes a toll on you as a person. So that's, I just think it's sad to see, and I think that he's going to get back at the top, because I don't think there's any question about his individual gifts.
Sure.
He's an amazing player. He's good. Really, really good. And he played really good at the last tournament they played as well, right? Watched some of their games. I don't know the other guys in the team, and I don't know how the inner works of their team is today, but I watched device a bit, and he's still really, really talented. So, yeah, I hope that he gets back.
I saw that dupreeh basically came along right at the end of Source into your teams, and then obviously in the early days, the first few years of CSGO, he was another mainstay along with dev1ce. Well, once they got into the lineup properly, right? One thing that's very interesting is back then, when the roles were like, I wouldn't even say they were set, but people just had more stereotypes. And obviously back then, he was known as like the entry player, the aggressive AK player. Who was dupreeh to you?
What's dupreeh to me? A teammate you could always count on. There was never issues with dupreeh outside the server. Or when we were doing practice and we had issues with certain things, I could always count on him to actually try and solve it with an open mind. He was always progressively working towards making the team better. That's the guy I remember. So he's kind of like my Freaky 2, just a better player. And just better. And he would always work towards becoming better. And he was always being the guy who would work towards a solution whenever we had issues with arguments between players and stuff like that. So, only ever had one issue with dupreeh. That was one of his ex-girlfriend back at Katowice. I think we had some issues with, and I think it was like a Swedish girlfriend as well. Those Swedish bitches, right? We had an issue there, but that isn't on him, right? And he was really young. But him being that young and being that good at actually solving problems in the team, it was perfect teammate. Kind of like a shit mix. Those two are very comparable in personality.
I can say, even though I was never a pro player, whenever I played Counter-Strike for many, many years, I was always also doing the in-game leader duty. And I can tell you, if you're a fan, everyone just looks at like the superstar or pro or whatever. But I can tell you, every in-game leader, the players we all fucking love are the entry players and the players that will just run in and that will just go even when like it didn't work 4 times in a row and you call them the same strat again. And they know that they might be running into a brick wall, right? Was dupreeh one of these players? Would you put him in that category?
Yeah. He never really he would question like good if you have good players on the team, they're gonna question you. They want you to become better as well as an in-game leader.
Okay.
They want you to like, why did you make that call when we like, so you get it? Like they want to progressively make you a better player as well. So he would question calls. He would do them. Like if you're a good teammate, you don't question the call in the moment. You do it without a question, because if you question in practice, you can do it. Like then you talk a lot about maybe we should do that flash. And there's a lot of communication when you're actually in an important game. You don't question things like that. We play out, and then the in-game leader or whoever makes the mistakes take the fall afterwards. And dupreeh would always be, he wouldn't question when we played. Obviously, he would be very down when we lost big tournaments and stuff like that, because he is competitive. All of us were. But I remember him, he was always like getting right back up and ready to, like, he was even more motivated to becoming better. So, yeah.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.